Perugia sits on a hill in the Umbrian countryside, halfway between Florence and Rome. It is a city with layers: Roman foundations, medieval streets, Renaissance architecture, and a modern heartbeat driven by its universities. It was here, in September 2007, that Meredith Kercher arrived from the University of Leeds. Her friend said she was excited, a little nervous, but ready for the adventure. She was studying European politics and Italian language, with a minor in film. Her accommodation on Via della Pergola was not glamorous. A whitewashed cottage at the end of a sloping driveway, surrounded by scrubby bushes and the hum of mopeds on the nearby road. But it had charm. Wood-beam ceilings, a little garden, a view of the valley below. Meredith's two Italian flatmates, Filomena Romanelli and Laura Mazzetti, were locals to Perugia's university scene. Amanda Knox, the fourth roommate, was a newcomer from Seattle, Washington. Amanda's journey had been different. She had saved for her year abroad through part-time jobs, including work at a coffee shop and a bookstore. Her decision to study in Italy was partly inspired by her love of languages, and partly by what she later described as a gut feeling to see the world. The two women were polite to each other, but their friends noted they had different temperaments. Meredith was tidy, structured, often cautious. Amanda was more impulsive, easygoing, someone who sang in the kitchen and played guitar in the evenings. The night before the murder, October 31st, 2007, Perugia celebrated Halloween with crowded streets, live music, and costumed revelers spilling into piazzas. Amanda and Raffaele had met just a week earlier at a classical music concert. He was reserved, with a soft-spoken manner, an interest in computers, and a love for manga and Japanese culture. They spent Halloween night together at his apartment, watching a movie. In later testimony, they both said they had smoked marijuana, cooked dinner, and stayed in. Meredith, meanwhile, went to a party at a local nightclub. Friends later said she left around midnight, walking home through Perugia's winding streets. Thursday, November 1st, was a holiday in Italy, All Saints' Day. Shops were closed. The streets were quieter than usual. That evening, Meredith had dinner with friends at a house nearby. They shared pasta, watched part of a movie, and chatted about plans for the weekend. She left around 9 p.m. This would be the last time anyone other than her killer saw her alive. The next morning, Amanda said she returned to Via della Pergola to take a shower and change clothes. She noticed the front door was open. The house was quiet. In the bathroom she shared with Meredith, she saw a few drops of blood in the sink. The mat on the floor was stained. In the larger bathroom, there was something even stranger: feces in the toilet. At this point, she said, she did not panic. She showered, dressed, and returned to Raffaele's apartment. Later, around noon, they both went back to the cottage. They found Filomena's bedroom windows smashed, clothes scattered, signs of a break-in. But Meredith's bedroom door was locked. Raffaele called the Carabinieri. Before they arrived, two officers from the postal police came to the house. They were following up on the discovery of two mobile phones found in a neighbor's garden. Phones that belonged to Meredith. When they forced Meredith's door open, the scene inside was devastating. Her body was partially covered by a duvet. She had suffered multiple stab wounds, and her throat had been cut. Blood pooled on the floor. The crime scene was chaotic. Multiple officers, roommates, and friends came and went in those early hours. The cottage's small rooms were quickly crowded. From the start, police noted what they considered odd behavior from Amanda Knox. She and Raffaele were seen embracing outside. She kissed him. She seemed calm. At one point, she was photographed sticking out her tongue. In her memoir years later, Knox would say she was in shock, grasping for comfort, trying to convince herself she was safe. But to the investigators, it felt wrong. By November 4th, rumors swirled in the Perugia press. There were whispers of a violent sexual assault. The fact that Amanda was a foreigner, young and photogenic, made her an easy target for tabloids eager for a headline. The nickname Foxy Knoxy, from a childhood soccer profile, was resurrected and weaponized. Late on November 5th, Amanda was summoned to the police station for what she believed was a routine conversation. Over several hours, the questioning intensified. She said later she was slapped twice on the back of the head, a method some Italian officers used to get attention. Eventually, she signed a statement placing herself in the house during the murder, claiming she had covered her ears to block out Meredith's screams. She named her boss, Patrick Lumumba, as the killer. Lumumba was arrested immediately, but within 14 days he was released. His alibi was airtight. Amanda retracted her statement, saying it had been coerced and confused by exhaustion and language barriers. But to police, the damage was irreversible. Forensic results identified fingerprints and DNA in Meredith's room belonging to Rudy Herman Gide. Gide admitted to being at the scene. He claimed he had consensual sexual contact with Meredith earlier that evening, but that he was in the bathroom when another person, whom he did not name, attacked her. Gide fled to Germany but was extradited back to Italy. The trial of Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito began in January 2009. Italian trials are slower than American ones, often spread over months. Prosecutor Giuliano Magnini described a scenario in which the three suspects killed Meredith during a drug-fueled sex game. He portrayed Knox as a dominant figure, jealous of Meredith's more cautious nature. The evidence included the knife, found in Raffaele's kitchen, claimed to have Amanda's DNA on the handle and a trace of Meredith's DNA on the blade. The bra clasp, discovered in Meredith's room 46 days after murder, with Raffaele's DNA. Mixed DNA, samples in the shared bathroom containing traces of both Amanda and Meredith. The defense countered that the DNA traces were minimal and could be contamination. No fingerprints, hair, or skin cells belonging to Amanda or Raffaele were found in Meredith's room. The break-in could have been staged, but if so, it could also point to someone else. On December 4th, 2009, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Amanda was sentenced to 26 years, Raffaele, 25. Gide, tried separately, was convicted and sentenced to 30 years, later reduced to 16. When Amanda Knox entered the Court of Assizes of Appeal in Perugia in late 2010, she was no longer the girl smiling awkwardly in photographs from 2007. She was thinner, paler, her hair darker, and her voice more measured. In Italy, an appeal is not simply a review of paperwork. It is a full retrial. Witnesses can be recalled, new evidence introduced. For Knox and Sollecito, this was their chance to dismantle the pillars of the prosecution's case. At the heart of the appeal was the forensic evidence, specifically two items, the kitchen knife and the bra clasp. The defense brought in independent experts from Rome Sapienza University, Professors Carlo Vecchiotti and Stefano Cani. Their task, re-examine the DNA evidence. Their findings would ripple through the case. They concluded that the alleged DNA trace of Meredith on the knife blade was too small to be considered reliable, what's known as a low copy number sample prone to contamination. Moreover, they found no trace of blood on the blade. As for the bra clasp, they noted that it had been collected 46 days after the initial search, and by then, the crime scene had been entered and exited by numerous officers, increasing the risk of contamination. The appeal also gave the defense room to counter the prosecution's theory of motive. There was no credible evidence that Meredith and Amanda had any deep conflict, let alone one that would explode into violence. Knox took the stand, delivering a statement that was part personal testimony, part plea. I did not kill Meredith. I have never hurt anyone. I did not know Rudy Gide. I did not encourage Raffaele to harm Meredith. I was not there. I was not involved in this crime. Her words were steady, but her voice cracked at the edges. By the summer of 2011, public perception had shifted, at least outside Italy. International media began to portray Knox not as the she-devil of the prosecution's theory, but as a young woman caught in the machinery of a flawed investigation. When the appellate court delivered its verdict, the streets outside the courthouse were packed with reporters and onlookers. The judges read the decision. The convictions of Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito were overturned. They were to be released immediately. Knox, weeping, whispered, "Grazie, thank you," as guards removed her handcuffs. She was on a plane back to Seattle within 24 hours. The Italian public reaction was divided. Some saw the acquittal as justice correcting a wrong. Others felt it was a failure, that Meredith's killer or killers were walking free. But the story was far from over. In March 2013, Italy's Supreme Court annulled the acquittals, ordering a retrial in Florence. Their reasoning: the appellate court had not properly considered certain pieces of evidence and had been too dismissive of the prosecution's theory. Amanda Knox was back in the headlines. But this time, she was in the United States and vowed not to return to Italy voluntarily. The Florence court re-examined the evidence and reinstated the guilty verdicts. The sentences were adjusted. Knox to 28 years and 6 months, Sollecito to 25 years. For Knox, it was a surreal form of double jeopardy. From her home in Seattle, she spoke to television cameras. "I will never willingly go back to Italy. I am frightened by this unjust verdict, and I will do what I must to defend myself." On March 27, 2015, Italy's highest court, the Court of Cassation, issued its definitive ruling. Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito were acquitted once and for all. The judges went further than before, stating there had been stunning flaws in the investigation and an absolute lack of certain evidence. Their written reasoning criticized the media circus and the pressure it placed on investigators to produce a coherent, sensational narrative rather than to follow the facts wherever they led. Rudy Guy, by then, was serving his sentence for participating in Meredith's murder, the only person whose conviction would stand. In the years that followed, Amanda Knox became both a symbol and a cautionary tale. She wrote a memoir, Waiting to be Heard, in which she described the surreal dislocation of living under constant suspicion, the weight of public opinion, and the quiet moments in prison when she would stare out the window, imagining freedom. She also became an advocate for criminal justice reform, particularly around the dangers of false confessions and media bias. For Meredith's family, the pain never lifted. They have always maintained that too much focus was placed on Knox and Sollecito and not enough on ensuring that all who were involved were held accountable. As the narrator, I can't ignore the duality of this case. On one side, a young woman brutally murdered in her own home, a tragedy that demands justice. On the other, the risk that justice was obscured by human error, bias, and the hunger for a story that would grip headlines. The Amanda Knox case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. That forensic science, when mishandled, can mislead as much as it illuminates. That interrogations, conducted under pressure, can extract words that later become cages. That public perception is not shaped solely by facts, but by the stories we choose to tell. And above all, that once a narrative takes hold, whether it's Foxy Knoxy or wrongfully accused, it is almost impossible to shake free. From the moment Meredith Kercher's murder hit the Italian press, the story had all the ingredients that editors and headline writers crave: an exotic setting, a beautiful young victim, foreign students, and whispers of sex and violence. Tabloids in the UK painted Amanda Knox as Foxy Knoxy, a nickname lifted from a childhood soccer team profile, twisting it into something salacious. Italian dailies speculated about occult rituals, love triangles, and marijuana-fueled orgies. Television crews staked out the cobblestone streets of Perugia, broadcasting live from outside the cottage. In the days following Knox's arrest, photographs of her and Sollecito kissing outside the police station were splashed across front pages. The image, devoid of context, became shorthand for perceived coldness, a lack of grief. The prosecution capitalized on this imagery. In press conferences, they described Amanda as manipulative, calculating, capable of deceit. Giuliano Mignini, the lead prosecutor, presented theories that shifted over time but always framed Knox as a central figure. Across the Atlantic, American outlets initially followed the Italian lead, but as the months passed, questions began to surface. U.S. reporters noted inconsistencies in the forensic evidence, cultural misunderstandings, and the unusually aggressive tone of the prosecution. Still, the damage to Knox's public image was profound. Once a nickname like Foxy Knoxy embeds itself in headlines, it takes on a life of its own. The trial in 2009 played out like theater. Every day, the narrow courtroom in Perugia was packed. Journalists in the front rows, families of both Meredith and Amanda sitting stiffly apart, and a rotating cast of onlookers who queued for hours to secure a seat. The prosecution's narrative was clear. This was not a simple burglary gone wrong. They argued that Knox, Sollecito, and Gede had been together that night, that sexual tension and resentment had escalated into violence. Their star evidence remained the knife and the bra clasp. On a screen in the courtroom, prosecutors displayed photographs of the blade, diagrams of the DNA sequence, and grainy images of the clasp retrieved from under Meredith's bed. They replayed Knox's statements from the interrogation, the ones in which she implicated Patrick Lumumba, and framed them as proof of a shifting, unreliable account. The defense, led by Luciano Gerga and Carlo Dalla Vedova, fought back with precision. They challenged the handling of the crime scene, the lack of Knox's DNA in Meredith's bedroom, and the failure to secure certain pieces of evidence in the crucial early hours. Witnesses were called. Neighbors who heard footsteps, forensic specialists, friends who described the atmosphere in the days before the murder. Each testimony added another layer, but also more contradictions. One thread that ran through the entire case was a cultural divide. Italian prosecutors and journalists interpreted Knox's behavior, her tendency to smile nervously, her casual affection towards Sollecito, her open discussion of sex, through a distinctly Italian moral lens. To many in the U.S., these were quirks of personality, not evidence of guilt. To some in Italy, they appeared as signs of coldness, of moral looseness. This disconnect widened as the trial progressed. Italian outlets focused on supposed love triangle and wild lifestyle, while American networks increasingly framed the story as a miscarriage of justice. When the first verdict came down, guilty, the courtroom erupted into two distinct emotional realities. For the Kerchers, it was validation that the system had found those responsible. For Knox's parents, it was a crushing blow, confirmation that their daughter would spend more than 2 decades in a foreign prison. The sentence, 26 years for Knox, 25 for Sollecito, echoed around the world. Outside the courthouse, TV cameras captured Knox being led away, her expression a blend of disbelief and resignation. In Seattle, candlelight vigils were held. In London, headlines read, "Justice for Meredith." But the case was far from over. For Amanda Knox, the years after the 2009 conviction were a study in endurance. She was moved between facilities. Capan Prison outside Perugia became her home. The days blurred into routine, roll call work assignments, Italian language lessons, exercise in the courtyard. From the outside, her family waged a relentless campaign, raising money for legal fees, securing media interviews, working to keep her case in public view. In Italy, public opinion remained split. To some, she was still the manipulative Foxy Knoxy. To others, especially after more details about the forensic mishandling emerged, she began to look like a young woman caught in a broken system. Raffaele Sollecito's experience mirrored hers. The two wrote occasional letters, but over time, their communications dwindled. They were fighting parallel battles in the same war. Italian law allowed for multiple levels of appeal, and Knox's legal team knew the first was their best chance. The appeal trial began in late 2010 and ran through 2011. This time, the focus was on the evidence itself, specifically whether the knife and bra clasp could be trusted. Independent experts appointed by the court delivered a damning assessment. The collection and testing of both items had been compromised. The DNA on the clasp was likely contaminated after it was left at the scene for over 6 weeks. The supposed Meredith DNA on the knife's blade was so low in quantity that the results were unreliable. For the first time, there was a tangible crack in the prosecution's foundation. As the months passed, the courtroom atmosphere shifted. There were fewer dramatic speeches from Magnini, more technical debates about chain of custody and international forensic standards. On October 3rd, 2011, Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito stood before the court to hear the appeal verdict. The judges overturned their convictions for murder. The courtroom erupted. Cheers from the defense side, sobs from the Kerchers, a stunned silence from the prosecution table. Knox was freed after nearly 4 years in prison. Cameras swarmed her as she walked out, thin, pale, clutching a white sweater. When she landed in Seattle the next day, the reception was overwhelming. Supporters held banners reading "Welcome Home." Amanda, in her first press conference, her voice trembled as she said, "Thank you for believing in me." But in Italy, the case was not over. Prosecutors announced they would take the acquittal to the Court of Cassation, Italy's highest court. In 2013, the Supreme Court overturned the 2011 acquittal, ordering a retrial in Florence. The decision stunned Knox and Sollecito, both of whom had begun rebuilding their lives. The retrial unfolded in early 2014. Prosecutors largely repeated their earlier case, though the scientific weaknesses in the evidence had been publicly dissected by now. Still, the narrative of the sex game gone wrong was revived. In January 2014, the court reinstated the guilty verdicts: 28 years for Knox, 25 for Sollecito. Knox, now living in the U.S., did not return to Italy. Sollecito was briefly detained near the Austrian border, but later released. In March 2015, the Italian Supreme Court issued its definitive ruling. Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito were acquitted of Meredith Kercher's murder, this time for good. The court cited stunning flaws in the investigation, the absence of credible evidence, and the contamination of key forensic items. They concluded there was no proof Knox and Sollecito were at the crime scene. Rudy Guide remained the only person convicted in connection with the murder, having admitted to being present but denying killing Meredith. He served 13 years before his release. Looking back, the Amanda Knox case is not just a story of one murder in a medieval Italian town. It is a lens into fragility of justice, how public perception, media framing, and flawed science can converge to condemn and later to exonerate. The wrongful conviction theory gained ground not through a single revelation, but through the slow erosion of certainty. The knife that didn't match the wounds. The bra clasp handle without gloves. The absence of Knox's DNA in the room where Meredith was killed. In the end, the courts acknowledged what her defense had said from the start. Suspicion is not proof, yet the shadow remains. For Meredith Kercher's family, there is no closure, only the enduring loss of a daughter and sister. For Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito, there's a haunting knowledge that freedom came only after years of public vilification. And for the rest of us, there's the unsettling question: how often does justice get it wrong?